Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Let's take a sec here and let folks make their way in. Looks like we got some pretty good numbers of parents joining us tonight. That's great. That's fantastic. Couple of housekeeping rules tonight, housekeeping guidelines here for you. We're going to be going over some, high-level information about, what to do after the FAFSA or the CSS profile are submitted. So if you have specific questions, we'll do our best to try to answer those questions as much as we can, but it really, really helps us if you put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, okay? Q&A, not the chat. It's hard for us to answer questions in the chat. We tend to get, focused on the Q&A, don't even notice the chat. So again, if you have questions, we'll do our best to try to answer them, but help us out by putting them in the Q&A. And then also, if you want some additional help beyond tonight, we at the end of the webinar, we'll provide you with some information about how you can reach out and book a free consultation and talk with us and some of our services if you're interested in that kind of stuff too. So that's another way to get your questions answered, especially if you have some very complicated or circumstances where you don't want to share information in the Q&A. Totally understand that. I'm happy to chat with you. We'll give you the information about how to meet with us towards the end of the webinar tonight. So why don't we introduce ourselves? My name is Jason Slone. I'm one of the college funding experts at College Aid Pro, and I've been in higher education for a long time, since 2002. I've been a professor. I was a dean for 7 years, two different universities. So I always make Kevin laugh by saying I'm the former dean that spills the beans for parents. And
It
then
gets me every time because it's catchy. It's catchy.
it's true. That's true. I love spilling the beans.
It's true.
And been a financial advisor since 2008. And so I've been doing college planning for several years now. And since 2019, I think, ish, something like that. But more importantly, I'm the parent. I have three kids myself. I got two in college. One's a senior, one's a sophomore college. And I have a ninth grader in high school. So I have another one coming along as well. So I feel your pain, parents. I've been in your shoes. I've gone through this as a parent. It's painful. My kid called me today and said his radio stopped working on the truck. So now we got more money even more money for college. So anyway, and my colleague, teammate, friend, Kevin Murphy, you want to tell me a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. I'm also one of the college financial aid experts here at CAP, and I too, you've been definitely a financial advisor way longer, even doing financial planning way longer than I have. But in 2018 I got into this. I was working in financial services. I fell in love with the college process, financial aid, helping families save money on college, and stopped doing, working on that side, on the financial services side, and now only focus and have for many years on helping families figure out, how to save money on college, how to plan, how to pay for college, all those things. But yeah, and you said around 2019. I got into this, like I just said, around 2018, and between you and myself, Jason, I think it's fair to say I don't even know how many, 3,000 families we've helped, maybe more, maybe a
Yeah,
little less, but somewhere around there.
it's a lot.
So yeah, everyone on tonight's call, you are definitely in good hands. And we know that it is a stressful process. We know that it's a stressful, really stressful time of year. So we are going to do our best to help reassure you that everything's going to be okay. But I'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, great. So why don't y'all let us know where you are? Kevin's in New Jersey. I'm in Savannah, Georgia.
Yep.
We got some pretty awful weather here today. I actually had to put on a hoodie for
Oh,
those of
that's
you,
terrible.
those of you who are
That
up
sounds horrible.
north.
I have to wear a winter coat, and when you breathe, you can see like a whole outline of a body.
Oh, I've seen
It's,
Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut. Yeah, I've heard about the snow up there. California, okay, no, Alabama. There you go. I think you're going to make the college football championship. We'll see. All right, we got folks from all over. Michigan. I'm an Ohio State grad, so sorry, not sorry about last weekend. Big win, Ohio State, the Ohio State. All right, we got folks from all over. Fantastic. That's great. Good deal.
one more
And
thing.
we,
I
yeah,
want to see high school grad years. I'm going to assume everyone
yeah.
on tonight's call as a senior, but if you could throw in the chat when your students graduating high school, it'd be good for us to see if we have all seniors, mostly seniors, a few underclassmen.
Yeah, looking like 26s, 26s, 26s.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, not surprising. You parents of seniors, you're in the thick of it right now. filing the, as we'll see to talk about tonight, filing the financial aid forms. Unfortunately, you're not done. That's just kind of one of the first steps, unfortunately. So the process is it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, all right, good deal. We've got folks from all over, mostly seniors. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. So I look right, Murph, and see that.
Yeah, you can see
All
it.
right, fantastic. So I assume you all know about us here at College Aid Pro, but our mission at CAP is we're trying to help families, and we want to end student debt crisis. So we have this huge problem in the United States. College has gotten so expensive, and it's also complicated and confusing, the financial aid, system and so forth. So we're trying to help, empower families to shop smarter for college, understand how it all works, so you make informed, smart decisions, and ideally get the cost of college down. So that's why we get up every day and do what we do. Oh, that's us. I forgot we had a presenter slide, so we can go ahead and skip through that one, I guess. We're your presenters, Kevin and Jason. All right, now before we jump into what to do after you file the forms, let's talk briefly about why you should, in case you haven't, because we've talked to a few families and they're like, I'm not even going to bother. It's not even worth it. We're not going to get anything. And so, in case you haven't completed your forms, you absolutely should submit them to all the schools. A couple of reasons why. Number one is you might be eligible for need-based aid, and you don't realize it. The way they determine need-based financial aid is they look at what income and assets you have based on what you report on the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and then they make a determination on base that. But a lot of parents operate with this myth that, oh, we just make too much, we're not going to get any financial aid at all. So what's the point? I've seen families with $300,000 of income get need-based aid at some schools, depending on their circumstances, and vice versa. Parents with low income but high assets, they still get some need-based aid. So if you don't assume you're not going to get any need-based aid, and definitely don't use that as a reason not to submit your forms, because it's better to submit them and not get anything than to not submit them and leave money on the table. Second thing is, even if you are one of those families that you're not going to get any need-based aid because you just make way too much money. Congratulations, by the way. Um, uh, but your student could still get merit aid. You still could get scholarship money. And even if you don't qualify for need-based aid, schools that give merit aid want you to file the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So if you don't file it, you could be losing out on scholarship money. Okay. A third reason is this may be your only chance to apply for financial aid. So there are a lot of schools out there where if you don't apply for financial aid in the first year, you can't apply for years 2, 3, and 4 of college. So you're out of luck. And that's very risky. Heaven forbid you lose your job, or you have a medical event or something major change in your life, and all of a sudden you need financial aid and you want to apply, you might be out of luck. So you need to apply in the first year to be able to apply for years 2 and 3 and 4, hopefully not 5. Reason number 4 is kind of what we're going to be talking about at tonight's webinar primarily, consideration for appeal. So the way the financial aid process works, as I said earlier on, it's kind of a marathon. Is the first step is to file the FAFSA and the CSS profile. In other words, you're filing an application for aid. You're asking them to give you financial aid. They will come back and give you an offer. Now that offer might be 0, you don't know. But whatever they offer, you can appeal that offer and try to get more money. And we're going to talk a lot about that tonight in tonight's webinar. It's the main focus of the webinar. But if you don't apply for aid, there's nothing to appeal because you're not going to make you an offer. Okay. And so this is another reason why you want to submit forms, because you could be leaving money on the table there. Even if you get 0 financial aid in the initial offer from a school, you might get aid upon appeal, but you got to do the forms to be able to do the appeal. And then the last reason we share with parents is, in this case, it's the FAFSA. If you need or want to use student loans, use loans to pay for some part of college, the only loan your student can get in their name without you co-signing on it is the Federal Direct Student Loan, the FDSL. Okay, that is the only one. If you get any other loans, private loans or whatever, you're going to be the borrower, not your student, or you're going to be the co-signer, which means you're responsible legally for that debt. And so if you're going to, if your student's going to take out the Federal Direct Student Loan, you have to file the FAFSA. You have to file the FAFSA for your student to get the Federal Direct Student Loan. And even if you don't need loans, we often counsel families to consider using this loan. A couple of reasons why. Number one is your kid has some skin in the game. I told you I got two kids in college right now, and I'm trying every trick in the book to make sure they're going to class and passing and going to graduate on time and so forth. And if your kid has some skin in the game, like, look, you're paying for part of this. Maybe that'll motivate them to not miss class as much and that kind of stuff. But also, you can make the loan payments for the student. There, the student builds some credit. It's kind of a bridge loan to free up some cash. You don't have to pay it all up front. So there's a lot of pretty good reasons to use the federal direct student loan, but you got to file the FAFSA in order to get that. So just to wrap up this part of it, if you haven't completed your forms yet, you're not sure whether or not it's even worth it, we highly, highly, highly recommend that you do. Okay, so there are two forms. The FAFSA is the form that all colleges use. Okay, stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is an application. In other words, you're applying for aid. You're going to put all your information on the FAFSA, and then then that information is going to get that application information is going to get sent to all the colleges you list, and then the colleges will look at what it says and determine if you qualify for aid. Okay, that's sort of the gist. It goes live in October of the senior year, October 1st. So it's obviously been live for 2 months now. And the FAFSA is connected to the IRS database. So basically, it's going to pull over your tax returns from the prior year. This is a weird rule, the way financial aid works. But if your kid is going to college in 26 next year, you file the FAFSA this year, 25, and they're going to pull over your most recent tax returns, which was last year. So there's always a 2-year look back period on the income. And if you're in a divorced, separated, co-parenting situation, the custodial parent is the only one that has to submit the FAFSA, only one parent. And it's defined as not the parent with whom the kid lives most of the time, but the parent who provides the most financial support. So a little bit of a gray area there and planning opportunity for you potentially. And so the procedure for this is you're going to start by creating your FSA ID at studentaid.gov. Your student's going to need one. The parent's going to need one, at least one parent. And you're going to need that FSA to log in. You're going to log in as the student first and do that. And then the parent's going to log in and provide the contributor information to the student's application. Okay. So a couple of tips on the FAFSA. Again, we just want to knock out here at the beginning a little bit about, trying to motivate you to submit your forms if you haven't, but also these tips set up potential corrections or appeals. So if you've made any of these mistakes, these are something that you might want to go back and correct. Number one, don't include your retirement accounts under investments. Okay, so you don't have to report any money that's in an IRA or a 401k or a 403b or a Roth or anything like that. So this is a common mistake parents make or students make. You don't have to include retirement accounts as an investment. Okay, so again, if you've made any of these mistakes, you're going to want to go back in and make corrections. And you may want to also do appeals. You may want to do both. And we'll talk about both those here in a sec. Number two, don't include your primary home equity under parent investments on the FAFSA. Okay, so if you own a home that you live in, at your primary residence, you have some home equity in there, you do not have to report that as real estate. Okay. Now, if you have rental properties or a second home or a lake cabin or condo in Florida, something like that, then yeah, you would have to list the equity in that, but not the equity in your primary home. Okay. Number three, don't include parent-owned 529 account values for other siblings under parent investments. So if you have a 529 for your kid, that's a parent investment. Number one, make sure you don't put that as a student investment because it's a parent investment. The parent's the owner, student's the beneficiary. But if you have multiple 529s for multiple kids, the FAFSA doesn't require you to list all of those, just the one for the student in question that's applying. Okay. Number four, don't miss an opportunity for a student to get a work-study job on campus. When that question comes up, hit yes, because this is one of those things where, work-study job on campus, if your kid can get a job at the library or something, checking in books and doing nothing, they can sit and get paid to do their homework. But if you check no, then your student's going to be out of luck. Or say your student is, an engineering student or pre-med and they're working they're a biology or chemistry major, they could maybe have the opportunity to work in a lab, which would be amazing, research experience. But it's a work-study job. If you don't select yes, you'd be out of luck. So make sure you want to select yes on that one. Number five, don't assume your student aid index is what you'll actually be expected to pay at every college where you're expected. Okay, so your student aid index is a benchmark. It's an index of a ballpark of how much colleges think you can afford, but that's not what you will actually pay. The schools will use that to determine about how much financial aid to offer you, okay? But it's not exactly what you will pay at every college where you're going to be accepted. So you're going to have to wait till you get your financial aid award offers later to see how much you're actually being asked to pay. The SAI is not what you're actually going to pay necessarily. Okay, number six, do not overvalue your business or other real estate. Okay, we see this a lot. If you're a business owner, your instinct is to probably want to think your business is worth a lot. This is the one time in your life as a business owner where you want to look as poor as possible. Okay, so be honest, but don't overestimate the value of your business. Same thing with secondary real estate. If you own a second home or a rental property, of course, from a financial planning perspective, you want it to be worth as much as possible, but not right now. For financial aid purposes, you want it to be look as poor as possible. Again, be honest, just don't overvalue those assets. Okay. And then the last one, don't miss deadlines. Okay. Every school's got different deadlines. There's no deadline for the FAFSA per se. The deadlines are from the schools. So the deadlines are going to vary based on whether or not your kid applied early decision, early action, regular decision, all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have to keep track of all those deadlines and make sure you get the FAFSA in before all of the important deadlines. So those are some FAFSA tips for you. Again, if you made any mistakes, now that we've gone through this, we'll talk about corrections here in just a sec. Now, the CSS profile is same thing. It goes live on October 1st, so it's been live for 2 months. This form is required at about a couple hundred colleges, mostly private schools. So this is a private form, whereas the FAFSA is a federal government form. The CSS profile is a private form used mostly by private colleges. There are a few publics that use it, like Michigan, Wisconsin, and a few others. But so you need to check to see if the schools your student's applying for requires just the FAFSA or the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Okay, if they do, you have to file a CSS profile. You're going to file it at collegeboard.org. College Board is the company that administers the SAT. Okay, and so that's how you'll log in to do this. Now, a couple of differences between the CSS profile and the FAFSA. One is on this one, the home equity in your primary resident is assessed. You do have to report the value of the house you live in. Now, not every school will use it in the same way, but you have to report it. Okay, but again, don't overvalue it. Number two, if you're divorced or separated, co-parenting situation, both parents are going to have to file. That's the different one. Another difference between the profile and the CSS profile and the FAFSA. Okay, so in the FAFSA, just the custodial parent, but in the CSS profile, you'll do the custodial and what's called a non-custodial parent profile. Right now, you can request a non-custodial parent waiver in special circumstances, but it's pretty hard to get it approved. It has to be, legally. You have to have legal documents. There has to be, very extreme kind of circumstances, whether they're, legally not around or something like that. In other words, you can't just say to the schools, well, my ex doesn't want to help pay for college, so they're not going to apply. That doesn't work. In that case, your student would get no financial aid. Okay, so you can request a waiver in special circumstances. Just know that that's really reserved for extreme cases. Okay, now business owners. If you got to file a CSS profile and you're a business owner, our joke is, have a glass of wine while you're doing the FAFSA and have an entire box of wine while you're doing the CSS profile. Okay, it's going to take you a while because they're going to ask you all kinds of questions, and just be prepared. Have statements ready. They're going to take a huge deep dive into all of your finances as a business owner. So unfortunately, it's really, really rough for business owners because they're going to want a whole bunch of information. And in general, it's just much more invasive and complex with many, many, many more questions than the FAFSA. So again, it's like a glass of wine versus a box of wine. All right. Now, where do you do this? You're going to log into the College Board where your student has an email and password they use to take the SAT. There's only a student account and a non-custodial profile. The custodial parent contributes to the student's account. So that's a little bit different than the FAFSA as well. Now, a couple of tips on the CSS profile to see if you made any mistakes that you may need to correct or appeal. Okay, because so all this is kind of setting up what you do after you file these, because if you file these already, you may have made some of these mistakes. You're going to have to go back and make corrections and then do appeals potentially. Number one, is when you do the CSS profile, you don't have to answer questions that are not required. There's a whole bunch of questions that are not required. They're totally optional. And in most cases, you just leave them blank for two reasons. One is it'll make the form go faster, but also you don't need to tell them more than they're asking. Don't over volunteer. All right. Now, in some cases, are things you want to share for sure, that will help your case, but a lot of these questions are designed to hurt you. It will hurt you, not help you. So just be very careful about that. Number two, don't overvalue just like with the FAFSA, don't overvalue your real estate, your own home and other real estate. You want to have what we call the least defensible value when you're reporting your real estate. Number three, don't include 529 money as a student investment or a student saving that is owned by the parents. Okay. If it's a 529 parent account, it's owned by the parents, not by the student. The reason for that is it hurts you 4x, 5x, 4 to 5x, if you list it as a student-owned asset rather than the parent-owned asset. So make sure you don't make the mistake. And if you made the mistake, you definitely want to do a correction and potentially an appeal. Number four, don't overstate how much you can pay. There's a question on the profile that says, it's a student application, says, how much are your parents going to contribute this year? This question is a fishing question. They're trying to get you to give them a number, and this can only hurt you. It cannot help you. So, if you're thinking, well, if they get in, we'll figure it out. The most dangerous words in financial aid planning. If they get in, we'll figure it out. And, you're applying to one of these Ivy League or Ivy Plus schools that are $90,000, $100,000 a year. And you're like, well, we'll pay 100 if it costs 100 because that's the dream school. And you put 100 grand, guess what you're going to pay? You're probably going to pay 100 grand. And if you try to appeal it, they're going to come back and go, well, you said you would pay 100 grand, so don't overstate how much you can pay for college each year. All right. Number five, don't overestimate future income earnings. They're going to ask you how much you think you're going to make this year, how much you think you're going to make next year. They're fishing. And if you're like, oh, I think I'm going to get a bonus. Oh, I think I'm going to get a promotion. Next year is going to be a big year with our business. We got this contract we're working on. And you overestimate how much you're going to make in the future. That can only hurt you as well. Okay. So again, you want to be honest, but don't overvalue your assets. Don't overestimate your income in the future, those kinds of things. Okay. Lastly, there's a question at the end of the CSS profile that asks if you have any special circumstances. And for a lot of parents, the instinct is to say, yes, we got these special circumstances, but let us tell you. And you want to tell them everything that's going on in your life, right? Our advice is wait. Don't share that stuff on the form because you're going to share it during the appeals process, which we're going to dive into now that we've gotten all this kind of common mistakes stuff out of the way. Okay, so if you share all your stuff on the CSS profile, all your special circumstances, and then they make you an offer, you can't say, yeah, but I got these special circumstances, because they're going to go, oh, we know, you put it on the form, we saw it. So we recommend waiting to explain everything in the appeal process after you've already been accepted, because then you can go back and say, okay, I can't afford what you're asking me to pay, and here's why, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then, of course, same thing. Don't miss your deadlines. Don't miss deadlines on either of these forms. Now, what do you do if you made a mistake? So we just listed some common mistakes that it's tips for those of you who haven't filed yet, but if you filed and made mistakes, what do? You can make corrections. You can make corrections on both, okay? So if you need to make corrections for the FAFSA, you're going to log into the student's account, not the parents. I just had to help a parent through this past week. They're like, I tried to fix it and it got all screwed up. And I'm like, well, let's see what happened. And they logged in. It was the parent account. Like, oh, no, you got to go to the student. So you got to log into the student's account after the FAFSA has been processed and make your corrections. Okay. We'll kind of show you how that works here in just a sec. And if you applied also to CSS profile and you made the same mistake on the profile, you're going to have to go and correct it on that one as well. So in that case, you log into the CSS profile application and you make the corrections through the tab on the dashboard. Okay, so what does this look like? Basically looks like this. You're going to log back in. You can see up there in the top left corner of the screen, it's going to say processed 2627. By the way, there's another tip. Make sure you're doing the right year. Don't do a FAFSA for 25, 26. You're doing it for next year, your application next year. But you'll see if it says processed, then it has been processed. Okay. And so you will see this little blue box there, before you start, it's going to give you some information. But up there in the top right, you're going to see that rectangle box that says actions. If you click on the little three dots, hover over that, it's going to give you 4 options: to add or remove schools, to edit, contribute information, make corrections, view summary. Okay, this is helpful to know in general. So if you need to add or remove schools, say your kid decides, since the Ohio State University is going to win the national championship again, and they decide they want to go to the Ohio State University and they haven't applied there yet, so they decide to apply, you're going to have to add that potentially. So you would go in and do add or remove schools there. Okay, but if you need to make corrections, you would obviously click on make corrections. Okay, and that's how you would do that, and you just follow the instructions there and make the corrections where you need to make them. Now, on the CSS profile, it's a little bit different. On CSS profile, you're going to enter the reason for the correction. Say you need to add parent financial information, or you made a mistake, you can click make a mistake. And then you're going to basically explain the correction in this text box. So it's a little bit different than the FAFSA. In the FAFSA, you can go in and actually change things in the different fields of the application. But in the CSS profile, you basically are going to go in, choose made a mistake as the reason for correction, and then you're going to explain the correction in that field box down there. You're going to type it out, basically. Okay. Okay. Now, what happens after submission? Let me take a break here and have a little sweet tea.
Sounds like a plan. I love the fact, not love, I'm joking, but the fact on the CSS profile, when you need to fix it, they basically just give you a little spot to write a
Yeah.
reason. There's no actually fixing the
Yeah.
form. And
Yeah.
what they don't tell you is that little explanation goes at the very, very, very bottom of the form, and the colleges don't often look at it. So just keep that in mind. But all right, now in terms of after the submission, right? So with the FAFSA, let's just say that you have to manually enter your tax information, or you were just randomly selected for what's called verification. Um, well, then you might have to provide a tax transcript. And you also may need to file your 2025 tax returns early or right away as soon as you possibly can, because you might need to provide that to the college as well. So usually if you're getting selected for verification, what you want to do is you want to be a little bit proactive. You want to get that tax transcript, and you want to try to gather all your tax documents in the new year to make sure you file them as soon as possible. Now, for the CSS profile, this is a little bit more common that you're going to be selected for verification if your student's applying to a CSS profile school, because a lot of the colleges, it's just almost like another step in the process. Right? They often have their own portals, or they utilize a portal through College Board called IDOC, IDOC. And that's where you're going to upload tax returns, 1099s, W-2 forms, whatever they ask for, a non-tax filer statement. You could go on and on. But business farm supplement, again, I could keep going, but they want this information because they're checking what you've told them, what you told them on the CSS profile and what was reported on the FAFSA. And they're not just looking for adjusted gross income, right? They're looking to see, well, how much did your business write off in losses? How much of that was depreciation? They might look even deeper to see if what you're telling them is true in terms of assets. And they look at different lines on the tax return to try and make assumptions there. So they're really looking through your circumstances if they're utilizing iDoc or collecting your tax returns, and you just want to be mindful of that. And the reason I'm saying be mindful of that, actually, could you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, never mind. The reason I was saying be mindful of that is because you don't have to overshare. You don't have to upload your full federal tax return, your state returns, your bank account statements, all of those things, right? You want to give them the bare minimum for what they're asking for. But okay.
I think this was the screen maybe you're
That
looking
was
for.
the slide I was looking for. Yeah.
Okay.
This is just showing after you submit the CSS profile. It's not immediate. If you refresh the page, sometimes you'll see iDoc being created, and sometimes it is immediate, but it really just depends. But if there's iDoc, you would click there, you click submit your documents, and then it would bring you to the next screen. And this screen is showing all of the documents that a college is requesting. And you can even see, like, on the right-hand side, it says institution requesting. They even tell you what college is asking for what documents. Now, in this case, there's only one. I think this is Amherst, but I could be wrong. But and then you can see here that it's the federal tax return. Again, not the state, nothing, just your federal tax return and schedules 1 through 3, schedules A through F, right? You only have F if you have a farm. But I don't know why I thought that was funny. But and then in regards to your W-2 forms, sometimes you don't have a W-2 form, right? Sometimes you might report some wages or an income, but maybe it comes from like Schedule C. If that's the case, you click there where it says click here if you did not and do not expect to receive, and it'll give you an option. It'll give you an option to upload kind of like a supplemental document instead of the actual W-2. And then here too, you're seeing that it says owner on the right-hand side here, non-custodial parent. I wanted to point this out because if you are divorced or separated, you use that same portal, right? It's a one-way portal. You don't have the ability to see what each other household has uploaded, but all information goes into this one spot. So you do want to keep that in mind, and make sure that that non-custodial parent is also aware of any requirements that they have.
Yeah, this is a really important part of this. I've had, if you're in a divorce co-parenting situation, I've had parents that are like very nervous about this.
Yeah,
I don't want the other parent to see my stuff and things like that. As Kevin said, it's very helpful to know this is a one-way portal. So when you put the information in there, it can't be pulled out or viewed or anything like that. So the reason I share that is I don't want any non-custodial parent to not submit the forms and hurt the kid's chance of getting financial aid just because they misunderstand and think that what they're doing is sharing their information with the other parent. So if you're in that kind of situation, please be reassured and potentially reassure the co-parent that this is a one-way portal, the information not shared, and therefore it's okay. And again, so the student's not hurt by this.
good point. One thing they can see, the names of the files, and I don't think that that could ever be, but just that is the only thing that they are going to see are the file names, not the actual files or anything else. But in terms of income, it's important to keep in mind from a few different perspectives. But if we're talking about appeals and we're thinking, well, they're using income that's not current, right? I mean, current seniors, they're looking at your 2024 household income. And with that, 2025 income may be different. 2026 anticipated income may be different. And that's all part of, the appeals process. And the colleges have an obligation to take that into consideration. It's called professional judgment. Now, the main driving factor behind your SAI is your adjusted gross income. So that's one of the largest components of the equation. And this is actually a little bit outdated for student income for the 2026-2027 school year. On the FAFSA, your students can earn $11,770 and it not count. On the FAFSA, on the CSS profile, there is no income protection allowance. Now, any dollar they earn above and beyond the income protection allowance is assessed at 50 cents per dollar. So you have to keep that in mind too. If your student's going to be busting their butt, working really hard during the summers, and you're getting a lot of need-based aid, well, there is a certain amount where it almost doesn't pay to keep working. But again, that's really specific to a situation. And I think for the most part, I'll speak for myself, Jason. I don't know if you'll agree. I don't often come or get to see students who are earning more than the income protection allowance. I don't know if
I had one family where this was the case. It was a medical provider who owned a center, and the student wanted to be a doctor, and so was working there basically a lot in the family business, which was a dental practice. And so we talked through this, but that's it's very rare for parents to make that much kind of money.
yeah,
I wish my
totally.
kids did. How do I get my kids to make this kind of money?
I know, right? All right. Now, in terms of appeals, yes, if your income is not accurate, right? If it's not reflective of your current situations, that's one reason to appeal. But there are so many different reasons that you would appeal. First, it's important to know the different types of appeals. So we have need-based appeals. Actually, you know what? I don't want to skip ahead. I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit in terms of, yeah, that's my fault. But so we have need-based appeals and we have merit appeals. Need-based appeals go to the Office of Financial Aid, and merit appeals go to the Office of Admissions. And regardless of who you're going to, regardless of if it's you as the parent writing a need-based appeal to the Office of Financial Aid or your student writing a merit appeal to the Office of Admissions, you want to be personal. You want to tell a story. You're communicating directly with some person on the other side of the aisle, right? With either a financial aid counselor or an admissions counselor. And they do get to make these decisions, right? So you want to be compelling. You want to tell your story. Um, you want to understand that, especially on the need-based side, there could be a request for additional documents, which we'll show in a little bit, but you just want to keep that in mind. And can you ultimately do both types of appeals? Absolutely, right? You could appeal merit and you could appeal need-based aid. That's completely fine. Maybe your student writes an appeal for additional scholarships. You write one because of a change in circumstances or a reduction in income or many other things. But there are so many different ways to handle the appeal. It's really important to understand what the right strategy is, though. Or you can't necessarily like try different strategies over and over until it works. It's good to nail down for your family, for that school, what's going to be the best reasons, what is actually going to have the highest likelihood of success. And it's not 100% easy to figure out, but you almost want to think through, well, what's going on in our lives, right? Like what reasons do we have? And then kind of, I'd say, narrow that down a little bit to make sure you're really including what actually would make a difference and what actually convince them to change the offers. Can you go to the next slide for me? And when you're going through, oh, sorry. Thought we were,
That's what you're looking for?
no, it's okay. I'll cover that slide and then I'll go back to the other one.
Okay.
Sorry. But in terms of an appeal, I'm under the mindset of it's literally a step in the process, right? I really do think families need to try to appeal. Now, I'll start off with the bad candidates, right? And this is, I always pick on Penn State, but are you going to appeal to Penn State and get more money? No, it's probably a waste of time, to be very honest, unless your income dropped down to levels that make you eligible for federal Pell. But like, there are some schools where you're not going to be successful. You don't have a high chance. And in some cases, it truly is just not worth the time. And if you had no special circumstances, no changes in your income, no changes in your situation, and it's a public university, probably not a flagship public university, probably not going to get any additionally. Now, on the flip side, right, what would be a good candidate? What reasons would actually work for an appeal, and what types of schools? Private schools for sure, right? So when we're talking about private colleges, your chances of success at appeal kind of go from like a 20% success rate at the public schools to the private schools 80+%, right? You've got a really good shot for one reason or another of winning that appeal. And think about like, okay, maybe in that year you had a retirement distribution or had a change in your income or had a capital gain that was one-off. Those are all great reasons for an appeal. Maybe you're recently divorced or separated, or maybe you're remarried and it's a CSS profile school that uses the non-custodial profile and they counted that step parent's information in the other household when they weren't supposed to. There are so many different reasons in a divorce, separated, or remarried situation that you could try and use on appeal. And it's important to understand the difference between IM and FM, right? And it's important to understand the reasons to appeal at IM schools, right? Those are the CSS profile schools versus the FM schools. And the FM schools just use the FAFSA. And a good way to think about it is, well, like CSS profiles, they count home equity. They look deeper in the situation. They give usually more need-based aid. The FM schools, they're not counting your home equity, right? So like you would not use home equity as a reason to appeal to an FM college. So again, you just want to narrow the focus down to make sure the reasons you're appealing are right. They're actually going to be successful. Also, if you own a business, I think this appeal I just did a few months ago to Princeton is a perfect example. They had to supply their business tax return to Princeton. Princeton got a hold of the business tax return and Well, the business had a lot in assets, right? And because of that, Princeton gave them no money. I think it was like 3 or 4 million in business assets is what was listed on the Schedule L of the tax return. And we were able to compel Princeton to remove all of that business equity, right? And they ended up paying about 40 grand for Princeton compared to like 90 or 100. So if you own a business, there's usually a good opportunity for an appeal to, because whether it's the value, whether it's the income, something, there's usually going to be a reason there. Another thing, the last thing here would be better offers from competing colleges. And this could be a great strategy, right? It's a strategy, though, that you would have had to have implemented before you get to the appeals process. What I mean by that is not every college competes with one another. So it's not too late if you don't already have competing schools on your students list, but to make sure that you have offers that you literally can use during the appeals process. Because it's not just school X gave me, $50,000 and you gave me 30, can you give me another 20? It is way more detailed, and they actually want to see the competing offers. They want to see these other financial aid awards before giving you anything else. So definitely definitely a plan, that one in particular, that you do have to implement before you get too far along in the process. And a lot of the different tips that we've given today, even if you've submitted the FAFSA, even if you've submitted the CSS, it's not too late to correct them. It's not too late to plan for an appeal. If you haven't submitted the forms, right, gives you a good opportunity to put yourself in a really good position for the appeals process as well. So, and there's still plenty of opportunity, even though we're in the beginning of December. Now, for an appeal, as I was saying earlier, you're writing this letter to a person, and it's not always a letter, and we'll show this in a second. It could be way more detailed, but you're communicating with someone in the Office of Financial Aid. Maybe you're going in front of a committee, but they want to know background, right? They want to know what's going on. They also want to know how much your student loves the school and how bad they want to go there and how it's their number one choice. And in some circumstances, you may know that it would take 5 grand to make that school affordable for you. Maybe you'd share that with them. Maybe you would be as detailed to know that due to your $30,000 loss of income, you qualify for an extra $6,000 a year in need-based aid, and that's what you want the college to give them. Then share that with them if you know all of that and are able to do that work and figure that number out. And you want to be as detailed as possible, and you want to kind of lay all your cards out there. If an extra $2, $5, $10,000, whatever it is going to allow your student to go to that college, just be transparent, tell them. And in terms of showing awards, you would not just do this if you're trying to negotiate a bigger scholarship. You would also be showing awards if you're trying to use better financial aid offers, even at schools like Harvard and Yale, to get them to match one another, right? Because Yale uses home equity, Harvard doesn't, and you can usually get Yale to match Harvard's offer. Not usually, always. And to do that, though, you have to show them Harvard's offer. Now, it's fair to say that our tax returns don't represent what's going on in our lives, right? I think that there's usually more, whether it's more expenses, more background, whatever it may be. But they've really only seen these numbers that are on the tax returns and on the CSS profile up to this point. So if maybe you're paying for an elderly parent, right? Maybe you have high medical expenses that aren't factored into your tax rate. Maybe you have high education expenses for younger children. Whatever it is, you want to make sure you're bringing this to the attention of the college. Now, sometimes appeals take 2, 3. Family I worked at last year, I think we did 5 or 6 appeals. So it could take multiple appeals. Now, it doesn't always mean that if you don't get what you want, you can just 100% go back and get more. It's not guaranteed, but in many cases, depending on the success and the outcome of that initial appeal, there might be a little bit more room. You have to know that, right? And you have to know after that, who do we go to? Do we go to the same person? Do we go to instead of going to the financial aid office, do we go to admissions this time? Do we escalate it? Right? But it's going to be important to just, I guess, do your homework, right? Do your homework before to know if you're going to need to go back and to know who to go to. And it's great to have your student involved. I think for their merit appeal, they're 100% going to lead the charge. Even on your financial aid appeal, having a little student statement about how bad they want to go there doesn't hurt, right? It can only help. Um, so it's good to have them involved with the entire process. And lastly, you want to make sure that you get this done before the enrollment deposit's placed. That being said, it's not the end if the deposit's placed, but you lose a lot of leverage, a lot of leverage. And in some cases, there are appeal deadlines too, where if you don't get the appeal submitted by a certain date, they won't even consider them.
One quick thing, Murph, I'm gonna jump in. I've gotten this question multiple times, so I want to answer it live. Is
Sure.
um, how do you know if it's a competing school? Like, how do you know it's a competing school? And the answer is it's got to be the same type of school. There's no list somewhere. You can't go to like, find a list, but it's the same type of school. So as Kevin said, like Harvard and Yale would be a good example of competing schools. I'll give you another one would be like small liberal arts colleges in the Midwest. Okay, or small liberal arts colleges. I went to one. I went to a small liberal arts college called the College of Worcester in Ohio. They are competing with schools like Denison University, Kenyon College, Ohio Wesleyan University, DePaul, other small liberal arts colleges like that. And so those are the types of schools. So if your kid wants to go to Worcester, and they should because it's the best college in the United States for sure. All right, I'm biased. But if your kid wants to go to Worcester,
A little bit.
your kid wants to go to Worcester, and you might also want to apply to Denison and Kenyon and see if they give you a better offer, and then you can go back to Worcester, that kind of thing. But you're not going to use Worcester and Harvard against each other, and you're not going to use Penn State or Ohio State and Worcester against each other. So very similar types of schools. Okay. And so, and a good question just came up here live. What about music schools? You might want to, you would find out competing, not necessarily competing college, but competing programs potentially, something like that. So there's no
100%.
clear cut way to do it, but generally what they want to be of similar types. And then one more comment, and then I'll hand it back over to you is, families, a couple of people asked, like, I can't think of any special circumstances other than I just can't afford college, right? Which I understand as a parent. I would encourage you, again, we're going to give you a link to book free consults with us, a free consultation. You might want to meet with us and see if we can come up with ways to help you with this, ways that you potentially can come up with appeal. We'll talk to you and take it, get a sense of where you are. Maybe we know some strategies for an appeal that aren't readily obvious to you. So you might want to take advantage of that. Okay. So
I want to add one thing that the music example, it's a great example how programs too, that's really important to look at. Last year, I did an appeal for a student with Oberlin and a few other colleges, and we ended up getting them, it was either 10 or 15 grand more. But again, it wasn't schools that normally wouldn't compete against each other by any means were because we were talking about, in this particular instance, he was a great violinist because of this music program. So it's a great point to bring up. But okay. Now this literally just got this email today, and I wanted to share it with
this
everyone
is
to understand.
unbelievable. Yeah, this is great. I'm so glad that you got this before tonight's webinar. Like this
It
is
was like
so
an hour ago. It was literally like an hour ago that I
that's
got this
perfect.
email.
Perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times maybe we make things sound very simple, but a lot of times I think the assumption might be you just have to write a letter and you're going to get more money, but it's not the case, right? And when we say you have to prove what you're telling them, I'm not kidding. And that's this request here, right? It's from a $100,000 private school. I'll just say it's from Barnard. I was trying not to say which school.
Yeah, just say it,
Yeah,
call them
it's
out.
but
Call them out. It's Barnard.
no, but so you see a cash flow worksheet. I've already started looking through the cash flow worksheet because I have to complete it for the or help the client complete it. They ask how much the person spends on alcohol and tobacco. They want to know everything. Um, they want to have a signed, not just a PDF, right? They want to make sure it's a physically signed and ink signature of the tax returns. They also want to make sure that you're actually paying private school tuition payments if you tell them you're paying private school tuition payments. A mortgage statement, bank account statements going back months and months, and there's more detail. So it is not always as simple as writing a letter and you're going to get more money. It's a really detailed process where I would say a good percentage of the time, more than half the time, you're going to have to provide supporting documentation like this, probably closer to like 60%, excuse me, 60 or 70%, 70% of the time, you're going to have to provide supporting documentation. And really, it's something that you need to be prepared for. And this is not easy. You get one of these things wrong, whether it's the cash flow worksheet or the written statement detailing the reason for the end of grandparent support, and the appeal fails. They're not going to give you more money. So again, you want to make sure that you are putting all effort and all energy to getting this appeal correct, because it's fair to say there is a lot of money on the line. I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
No, I mean that's the key stuff is like this is such an important part of the process. So many parents overlook this and don't do it. You may have to do this multiple years. That's questions come up a couple of times. If you know if you have special circumstance, it changes a year, two, three, or four, you may have to do this again. But the appeals is a very, very important part of the process. And and let me tell you, I will add one more thing. It made me think of this. Being the former dean that spills the beans,
Oh,
um, a lot of colleges hold back money for this. Okay, they'll have a bucket of money in their budget for the fall semester that they award out initially, and a lot of schools keep back a bucket of money in the spring. um, and here's why. These colleges are big businesses, and just like any big business, they are trying to make as much money as possible, to be crude about it. And so they're hoping you will take the financial aid offer they get for you, but they're holding back money in case you don't, because if by March, April, they are not meeting their enrollment targets. Like they gotta bring in 5,000 butts in seats, as we used to say. And it looks like they're not going to hit 5,000 butts in seats. They might start offering kids more money to try to get them to enroll as an incentive. So that's why it's really important to go through this appeals process. For many schools, there's money available. And so don't leave it on the table.
absolutely. It's a good point. I think
Yep.
one of the examples that we used last year, literally it was called an appeal grant, right? And it's a really, really good point. It's just look at it as part of the process. And again, that this is one example. There's all
Yeah.
different types of supporting documentation that the schools may ask for.
Yeah.
Now, don't just take our word for it. These are actual results from last year. And you can see that in some cases, Colby, Emory, north of 60 or 70 grand per year in extra financial aid. And in some cases on the smaller side, 3,000, but that's still times four, right? So even 3,000 times four saves you 12 grand. So again, these are just some of the examples. This isn't a full comprehensive list of every appeal we've done last year, but this is our class of 2025, some of the results. And again, you might see some schools that are familiar: Barnard, Brown, Seton Hall, Fairfield, RIT, so on and so forth. But
Yeah, Syracuse was a big one.
yeah, I think some of the big results from Syracuse aren't even on here because we were doing those appeals, I believe it was until May or June.
Yeah.
So this was already created by then.
Yeah.
But just again, another example that appeals are a step in the process and an important step.
Yeah.
Okay, so as Jason mentioned earlier, on the screen is going to be a QR code, and that QR code is going to link to book some time with us. And what we would do during that time and what we would ask for first would be, please make sure you have a completed MyCap account. It's going to be very difficult to talk about appeals without knowing your family's finances or your numbers. Now, if you have financial aid awards, great, right? It would be good to be able to reference those. But also, if you just know your circumstances, you know the schools your student's interested in, all of that is stuff that we want to talk through with you. And we're going to try to determine, right? First off, maybe you're not even at the appeals process. Maybe you still need to file the FAFSA or CSS profile. Let's talk through it, right? Let's make sure that you're in a good spot. And for the appeals process, let's talk through it and see, do you even have the possibility to appeal, right? Let's assess the situation. Let's see if you have a successful appeal, and then we will dive into how we can help with that. But that is there. And then I do want to share, bear with me one sec. I do want to share
You
the
want
other.
me to, you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, do you mind?
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you. I just want to share the other details that we have. that QR code, we wanted to do that because we do know that some folks are on mobile devices or might just be a little bit easier to take a screenshot or just scan the code. But so we'll also share this with everyone. Actually, I'm going to drop it into the chat now. So again, here's our schedule. Here's a link to book time with us. And we will really dive into your situation. So please just make sure you have a MyCap account. Make sure you have those details available. One per family. And to keep it free, you do have to book by tonight. You'll see that there looks like there's a good amount of availability now, but with the holidays and everything else, our calendars fill up very, very quickly. So we do ask that you book that by tonight to keep it free. And then if you wanted to learn about a little bit more of our detailed services and how we work with families, that'll be on here too. That includes details on our appeals package, which our appeals package also includes advice on loans. I do want to point that out. We do have to update that. It includes details on our financial aid package in case maybe you're just starting this process, maybe you haven't filled out the forms and you're looking for a comprehensive help. And if you're a DIYer, we totally get it, right? We have literally software for that. So what you would want to do is you'd want to sign up for our premium membership and you want to take full advantage of it, right? You'd want to watch our presentations, you'd want to upload your offers, you'd want to put all your information in to really get the most out of it. But so those are the different options that we have. And tomorrow you'll have a recording of the presentation to be able to watch this over again. But anything you want to add here, Jason?
Nope. That was a great little wrap up there. Yeah, just encourage people to reach out to us if you want some help with this. We do a lot of appeals for families. It's we said it's a very important part of the process, and we do a lot of them. We know what to say and what not to say. So
it's probably the most important part is how you handle the appeal. I just also put a direct link to our calendars in the chat as well, in case anyone was having a hard time opening up the QR code or the landing page.
yeah.
But thank you, everyone.
Yeah, there are a few questions we didn't get to at the end there, but hopefully we got there 54 of them. That's pretty good in an hour.
Did
But
our best.
yeah, hopefully this was helpful, everyone. Again, feel free to reach out if you want some help with
One sec. I do want to answer this one that just popped in the chat. If you have a hard time or you don't want to set up your MyCount account, we totally get it. That's okay. I'd say just one thing, do us a favor, book the consult, and you're going to get a meeting invite as soon as you book it. Just shoot us an email and let us know that you can't set up the MyCap account. Just so we know and we expect it, right? Not to be created or anything like that. Because usually we take a few minutes to look through your details before we even get on the call. So I just wanted to answer that one, not to interrupt you, Jason.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
But
all right. Good luck, everyone. Have a good evening. Thanks for joining us.
have a good evening, everyone. Good luck. Bye-bye.